Welcome to the Plant Trainers Podcast, where we're helping people improve their quality of life through nutrition and fitness. And now, your hosts, nutrition and wellness coaches, international speakers, Adam and Shoshana Chaim.
Hey, I'm Adam Chaim.
And I'm Shoshana Chaim, and we are
Propelled by Plants. Today we bring to you episode 297, Childhood Obesity and Weight Loss Therapy with Dr. Mondo.
In today's episode of the Plant Trainers Podcast, we talked to Dr. Mondo about obesity and about his journey through weight loss and about childhood obesity. And what we found so amazing was his depth, his connection, his emotion that he poured in, especially at the end of this episode. So you must listen to the end. The message that he has for people who are obese, children of any age, and for parents or loved ones of the person who is obese, who is overweight, who has been yo-yo dieting forever, the message that he has for them on how to speak to those people is just so incredible.
Yeah, it was a very honest and impactful conversation. One of my favorites that we've had so far this year. The message that he left us with at the end is going to make a super impact on anyone that listens to it. So hopefully people will listen right to the end and share it with the people that they know need to hear it the most. For those of you that don't know who Dr. Mondo is, he's a licensed psychotherapist, professor, and academic researcher who conducted the first psychological research with former contestants of NBC's The Biggest Loser, and I'm sure everybody has heard of that show. Dr. Mondo focused on the emotional and psychological aspects of weight loss and how most people, almost 95% of people, regain all the weight back after drastic weight loss. So you'll hear some tips in here on how we can help those that we love overcome obesity or takes the right steps in going in that direction to become a healthier version of themselves. And we will have links to everything we talk about in today's show at planttrainers.com/297.
The cool thing about Instagram is that it really highlights the quote, "A picture is worth 1,000 words." We have a great time on Instagram and Instagram stories, bringing plant-based living to life for all of you. There's only so much that you can hear in the episodes that we cover, but we also wanted to help inspire you and give you more tools for everyday living. So whether you're looking at how we're posting our meals, our workouts, our general healthy lifestyle tips, food shops, blogs, or time-saving tips, or the occasional goofy thing that our plant-powered kids did, we put it up there for you. So be sure to follow Plant Trainers on Instagram and say hi and interact with us. We love getting to know you there.
And now for a moment of gratitude.
Throughout the skating season, our daughter's friend's father had been picking her up, taking her skating on a Saturday afternoon for a couple of hours, getting all the girls together. So I'm grateful that he did that, and I got to be home with Adam and our son Russell and have one-on-one time with Russell. But I'm also grateful that, she's out and about and being active. And I encourage you all to find a way to make your kids a little bit more active.
I'm grateful for my meditations that I do every morning. I'm on an amazing streak of hundreds of days in a row of getting up and saying my mantra to myself and then doing my 10 minutes of meditation every single morning. And I really find that it's been helping me stay even keel through most of the day.
Dr. Mondo, you're on the Plant Trainers Podcast. Welcome.
So good to be here. Thank you guys for having me.
You're welcome. Do you have a moment of gratitude to share with us and our listeners?
I do. It's something that I'm often not taking a moment to be grateful for, but it's the internet. It's the ability for us to connect, social media, all that stuff. I'm grateful for that because it's allowed me to have a chance to have a conversation with you guys today. And I know that we both have this shared passion of wanting to reach people, and just the internet, the ability to today's technology that we have. There's so many things that are potentially wrong or negative about that, but I think it's a moment to be grateful that this conversation wouldn't be happening without this technology, and so I'm grateful for it.
Yeah, it's totally true, and that's how we connected, because I saw your story on the social media and I was reading it and I was like, wow, this guy has become a weight loss therapist, but he was a big guy and he had his own transformation story, and it made perfect sense for us to get in touch with you and share your story because it's pretty impressive.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a lifelong journey for me, and I always say this when I get a chance to speak, which is I really wish I could say, that this was the only time I ever lost a drastic amount of weight. But the reality is that this was a journey, not a destination. And truly every day, you speak of being grateful. Truly every day, I'm so grateful that I am where I am today in my journey with feeling healthier than ever. And I'm so grateful to plants and surrendering to plants and finally finding this way of eating and living. But the reality is that, I went through the majority of my life struggling with my weight and yo-yoing. I lost the same 75 to 100 pounds, probably 7 or 8 times. I stopped counting. That's why I estimate. And eventually I got to a point where I did all the internal transformative work that I was hoping to find at the finish line. I thought I'd lose weight and I'd love myself. Never happened. It was a rigged carnival game. It just never worked out for me. So I finally had to get to this point of being, overweight, unfortunately, again, around 300 pounds. And I had to find love for myself at 300 pounds in order for me to finally be ready to then have this transformation physically stick. And I think it's so counterintuitive. We often think you need to first physically transform in order to have the mental transformation happen. But for me, at least, I did it so many times the other way around. It took me finally being in a place of being at peace with myself in order for this to stick. And of course, I think that the modality too, finding plant-based. I'd never gone plant-based. And so that's also, of course, what's different this past 18 months has been me finding the plants and like I said, surrendering to the plants.
So is this the longest that you've kept it off? And I know that you intend to for forever, but this is the longest?
Yeah, it is. And as I mentioned, I think every day I wake up and I've grown so much, but I never want to assume that I've won or I have it figured out. So yeah, it's been 18 months and I celebrate every one of those days. I have an app on my phone called Days Since, and I go on that frequently and I'll look and just say, okay, today's been, X amount of days. It's been 18 months, a little over 18 months now. It was September 5th, 2017, that I finally surrendered to this way of eating. And I thought it would just be for 30 days. And I wanted to do an experiment to see how I felt. I didn't weigh myself, so I don't know how much weight I've lost. I know roughly the inches I've lost from my shirt size is going from a XXX to a medium, and pant size is going from a 40 to a size 30. So I know that there's been, a lot of weight that I've lost, but I just went at it with, let's see what happens. But yeah, it's been 18 months and this is by far, to really get into the details of it, even when I lost weight before, I was always having at least one day a week, at least one, if not two, where I would call those cheat days and I would just eat anything and everything that I could possibly think of. So I never really broke the chain of emotional eating to the full degree because I was still engaging in that at least one day a week. And so now with plants, it's not to say there's not times where I don't eat out of stress or things like that. But as you guys know, with this way of eating, especially eating in really nutrient dense foods, it's just hard to kind of do the same sort of pattern that you did before when you're eating processed foods and dairy and things like that. So this is the longest, and it's definitely, it feels so different.
Can we rewind a little bit and go back to your youth? And I was reading that you were known as the funny fat kid.
Yeah.
And I'd like to know how it happens that the funny fat kid becomes the guy who's helping people lose weight. And I know you mentioned the yo-yo dieting, and I want to get into that after, but I think it would be great to hear how it all came to fruition.
Well, the funny fat guy is, if there's people that are listening, and I hope there is, that grew up also being overweight. Now I'm talking to you guys. So, hey, we all know what that's like, that when you feel like when you're overweight in a weight shaming society, you pretty much always feel like you got one foot in the hole. And when you're a kid, you're just trying to do whatever you can to fit in. And, you don't want to be made fun of. And I was so fortunate. I hear tons of horror stories, both from my clients and just from friends who were overweight, and they got made fun of a lot. I was really fortunate that I learned from a quick age, if I could make people laugh or I could entertain people, then they wouldn't be laughing at me because they'd all be friends with me. And if they did say anything about my weight, it wouldn't be to my face. And so, I lived in that identity really of had lots of friends, but always very insecure about my weight. It was something that I kept private to myself. So yeah, the idea in so much of what I talk about, both in my show that I have on Facebook Live called Rewriting My Story, in my practice and the speaking that I do, this idea of rewriting my story, it's something I'm so passionate about because I've rewritten my story. I mean, I used to be the funny fat guy, the offensive lineman who hated running, and now I'm a marathon runner teaching people how to lose weight and be successful long term. So it's it's when I am reminded of kind of the two chapters of my life, the beginning and where I'm at now, it's a lot to take in. I'm still processing it, I guess. But how is it, to be specific and answer that? It's amazing because I feel like I've been given the opportunity to see what it's like and experience the pain of what it's like for so many people to feel hopeless and overweight and feel like they can't change. And I've been there, I lived it. And then to experience the opposite, which is, wow, like you can change literally anything that you think. Be careful of the stories you tell because eventually you'll live them. I was living a story. I was performing a story that said that I was supposed to be just the funny fat guy. And I eventually said, I want more. And I still like to be funny, and there's still parts of me that are the same, but I'm also different in many ways. And now I share my story so openly, so vulnerably, in part because it's who I am, but also because I want others to hear it and go, wow, I connect with that. And if he could do that, maybe I could do it too. And the answer is yes, you can. I mean, there's nothing special about me. We all can do this if we really just examine our stories. And also, as I mentioned, if we surrender to the plants.
So being that funny fat kid, we've heard something similar before from a lot of the other transformation stories we talk about, where either they were the one that partied the hardest, or they were the funny one, or they were the one who was always trying to get in trouble. Do you think we watched this show with the kids about perception? What's that called?
Brain games.
And it's all about perception and kind of, taking the focus off of one thing and putting it onto another thing. Do you think that was part of the strategy? If I could be funny enough, then I won't have to think about my weight as much and people won't comment on my weight as much. I'll pull the attention off of that and focus it somewhere else. And now you're saying you're still kind of funny, but now you're probably more real. Does that make sense?
It makes 100% sense. Yeah. And it's funny. So it's when I hear you mapping that out, I think of like a magician, an illusionist. And I never would have thought of myself as an illusionist. I would always thought, hey, I'm, because I being a therapist too, even, obviously as a kid, I wasn't a therapist then, but I was always comfortable. I was raised by just a single parent mom, and I was an only child. So I was really tight with my mom. And I just felt like I was always comfortable having deep conversations. But I guess in retrospect, a lot of times I would share about me, but this is the one area of my life I wouldn't share about. And so this was like, can I create a distraction? Look over here. And I felt like growing up too, and, probably all the way, probably it wasn't until the last, 4 or 5 years, I'm 35 now, have kids, and, things start to change after 30 and when you have kids. But I felt like for so much of my life, weight was the organizing factor and focus. I had this term when I did the research with Biggest Loser that we created, which is weight saturated identity, meaning that for folks that struggle with their weight, and especially when you grow up overweight, so much of your identity is just punctuated by the fact that you're overweight in your own mind. Now, whether or not people see you in that way, you assume they do, but that's the perception that you're assuming they have of you. And so you overcompensate and you do things like you're saying to create these illusions of distraction. Like, here, look over here. I don't want you to see this. Because there's so much insecurity, and the realness and authenticity that I think I had then was probably, 70 or 80%. Now I can say there isn't really a whole lot of topics. I don't know. Hopefully you'll bring up one today that can stretch me to where I go, ooh, that's uncomfortable to talk about. And that is something I'm so proud of, because I truly believe that we can't have the fullness of connection and intimacy in relationships if we're not willing to show all of those parts of ourselves and expose them. And so that's something that's so different. Yeah, growing up, I still had a part of myself that I was hiding from the world.
Okay, so let's try this. There's a huge problem right now with obesity. It's so bad that our kids are becoming obese at such a young age, and it's pretty much considered an epidemic.
Yes.
And it's ongoing. And so was there a defining moment in your life where you could pinpoint where you said, that's it, now's the time to make the change, and this is the reason why?
And this is the real time.
Yeah.
It's really going to work.
I had many moments where I thought it was the real time. I mean, I could go through them. I keep referencing this research with The Biggest Loser. Had a chance to do the first research study with contestants of The Biggest Loser. It became my dissertation. It became a roadmap to understanding, what are all the psychological changes people go through? Well, one of the things we found, and this is not surprising, but why you want to lose weight is going to determine your success and likelihood of keeping it off. And they say roughly only 5% keep it off over a 5-year period. So when you're looking at that, your why is really important. My why's changed. My why most recently, to kind of work backwards, what was different this time, 18 months ago, was I had one child already. I had my son Antonio, and we just found out that my wife was pregnant with my daughter Isabella. She's getting ready to turn a year old. And I remember having this flood of, this is everything you ever wanted. I grew up, again, as I mentioned, I didn't have siblings. I grew up with just my mom. I desired so bad to just have a family and to be a dad and to have, not just one, but multiple kids. And here I was at, 33 years old, and I was feeling like, oh my God, how am I going to get through my day? I barely have enough energy to keep up with Antonio. I barely have enough energy to keep up with my practice. I was getting pulled in different directions to do more speaking. I was turning that down, mostly because I didn't have the energy for it. And so that's really was this moment where, like I said, there was many moments in the journey of this is why, and this will be different. This last time, it was just me saying, I sense it's different in that this isn't about me trying to just wear off some self-hatred, because I really didn't hate myself. I mean, I was 300 pounds, but I didn't hate myself. I really was able to not have that weight-saturated identity. I was able to say, you know what? I'm a good guy, and I love all parts of myself. And you know what? I even rock the fact that I'm a bigger guy, and I'm confident with that. However, the reality is, and I hired a coach, a plant-based coach, and she said in my intake interview with her, she said, here's the reality. You're going to die probably before your daughter gets married at the current course that you're on, whether you want to acknowledge that or not. And you're talking to people about being healthy, and you're not the model of health. So my why was a big punch to the gut from my coach, Sharon McRae. And when she hit me with that, I thought, she's right. And my why became different. So at that moment, it really became not about losing weight. It became about two things. One, saying, I want to be around for my kids long term, not just be there, not just sitting on the couch and say I was present, but I want to be in the game with them. If they're running, I want to run with them. If they're moving, I want to move with them. If they're on the ground, I want to crawl around and not feel like I'm out of breath or that I'm so uncomfortable. And secondly, I want to have integrity. I want to be able to say that I practice what I preach. And I also know that deep down, there was probably a part of me that still was not fully on board, or I was still a little ashamed of the fact that I wasn't practicing what I preached. And it was holding me back. And so this time around, that's what was different. It was really my why shifting and being bigger than me, and also being legacy based. And those are two things that when I'm helping people, I always say, why do you want to lose weight? We all want to lose weight to look better and even feel better. But what's going to last long term is going to be things that are bigger than you. It's going to have an impact on more than just yourself, but on others, your community. And it has to be something that when you look back, people are giving a eulogy about you, or they're thinking about you when you're gone. It's going to be a legacy that you left that impacts more than just you, and it lasts for the long term.
So that's huge. We always talk about finding our why, and a lot of times the why hasn't skimmed the surface, right? And I think when you talk about that bigger thing, what's beyond you. It's not just looking in the mirror. It's not saying I'll love myself when I'm 180 pounds instead of 300 pounds. You really need to understand. And I think that children do it for a lot of people because we're in this reality where we want to be with them long term. We want to see them grow up. We want to see them have kids and all of that. But at the same time, for us, a lot of our why is that our children, this generation of our children, are not supposed to outlive us.
Yeah.
And if we don't set that example now, and if we don't make sure that we're setting our kids up for the very best now, then we're going to have a big hardship on us when we're older.
Yeah. That's something that you look back, and I look back at me as a kid and a lot of my own growth and getting to a point of being able to find the real answers to the long-term solution was for me to go back to that young boy that was overeating. And I look back at the photos and I look and I see that there was this shift, and there was this shift when my mom and my dad got divorced when I was 3. And my dad was from Mexico. He moved back to Mexico. My mom from the United States. And when he moved, I became really lonely, really sad, really, I miss my dad a ton. And I was alone a lot. And for me, I remember as I got older and being in elementary school, I was a latchkey kid. And I remember the moment I came home and I would open up the door and I knew no one would be there. My mom would still be at work. I'd feel this instant rush that would come over my body of just feeling lonely and scared and anxious. I'm super extroverted. I like being alone, and I find use in it now, especially, as I'm older and have kids and things like that. But when I was young, I dreaded being alone. I wanted to always be with friends and family. So when I walked into that house, what I did is I tried to, again, create the illusion that didn't exist by eating that feeling away. I would go straight to the microwave and I'd put Hot Pockets or chimichangas or whatever I could, and I'd turn the TV on and I'd distract myself from those feelings. So food for me, and again, as you talk about kids, this is one element of it, is that the food I was eating, I look back on, I had no clue what I was putting in my body in terms of, how it was engineered to make me addicted and fall into the pleasure trap. But also, that there was the emotional component, that what I really needed was I really needed connection, or I really needed to have someone teach me what it was like to learn how to be okay with feeling those feelings temporarily. It wasn't something I learned till much later in life, because for so long I just was trapped in that cycle and pattern. And so, when you think about the kids in today's generation, I think so many kids are living in food deserts. So many kids are living, intergenerationally in families of obesity, and these recipes are being passed down, not the genetics. And unfortunately, we need a food overhaul. We also need to reorganize our priorities, because I think so many of us, we're addicted to this food because it's meant to be addicting. But on top of that, there's also lots of emotional needs that we've been looking to be met in terms of our food choices. And there's also this distolerance for just being able to sit with feelings and ride the waves and know that they'll pass, because so much of what we have now in our generation is something to distract us right at our fingertips. And it's hard to just sit with things. And it's something that we're never really taught.
There's so much more great information coming your way. But before we get to that, one of the best parts of living north is when it finally becomes warm enough to get outside for a run wearing just a t-shirt again. The crisp, cool air helps wick away the sweat while we run, bike, or work out in our Propelled by Plants performance t-shirts printed on the exact same Ironman finisher microfiber material. It's fast absorbing, quick drying, most importantly, UPF 30+. You can also find us showing off our guns in our Training for Life cotton tees. So now's the time to get your own shirt. Each t-shirt comes with a handwritten note from us, because we believe that much in gratitude. And we love you, our listeners. So get your shirts at planttrainers.com/shop or click the link in the show notes. And now back to the show.
I can relate to the emotional eating. Adam goes away for 5 weeks every summer, and the second he leaves the house, I go straight for the cupboard.
So it's
And
my fault.
I go straight for the cupboard. I do. I have an active lifestyle. I do eat plant-based. I did have extra weight a while ago, but nowhere near an extra 100 pounds or anything like that. But still, I still find that I have found times in my life where, whether it's stress eating or whether it's that feeling of being alone, that I replace whatever it is that I'm looking for with food. Would you say that, in your research with The Biggest Loser, that you can find that pattern in just about everybody? Everybody has learned how to use food to fill some kind of void in their life, and this is how they've grown.
Yeah. Let's say this. I think that if we're doing the whole, out of 10 people, I would say 9.5 out of 10. Yes, I think it's something that I go back to a few things. One is the fact that, you go to The Pleasure Trap, Dr. Goldhammer, Dr. Lyle, incredible book. And, what it talks about there is just kind of this, almost detached perspective of looking at it and go, look, this is what our brains are engineered to do. It makes sense. Our brains are engineered to find ways to avoid discomfort and find pleasure. And so, of course, when the food that we have available to us has the ability to bring pleasure and release dopamine, then, of course, we're going to go towards that. We're going to choose to shift out of a discomfort state into a state of comfort with food. That makes perfect sense. But yeah, I think also, too, we just don't have a lot of emotional intelligence within our family systems, and even if we do have it, meaning we're being taught what certain emotions are, we're giving language around those feelings, we still think that there's certain emotions that we just never get comfortable sitting with. I know, again, the language I'm using now, being comfortable sitting with loneliness, those are things that were completely foreign to me. I had a mom that taught me a lot of emotional intelligence, but just whether it was the fact that she was super busy, or maybe she hadn't grown probably at that point of her life to know how to sit with those emotions either, that part of the lesson just wasn't there. So I might learn to identify I'm anxious or I'm lonely, but I don't know what to really do beyond trying to change it, And so I think that, all of us fall into this predictable pattern of we're just not really equipped unless we seek out tools, or we seek out programs, or we seek out podcasts like this to listen to really expand the way that we typically respond to those feelings, because I think we're hardwired to avoid them, and culturally it's reinforced.
Especially for men. They don't want to admit to it. They're not in touch with their feelings as much as women are, at least from my experience.
Well, men are told, boys are told, don't cry, and girls are told, don't worry, it'll be okay.
Right.
That is so, yes, 100%, and that's, I think, one of the things, if we look for silver linings that we're seeing now is, with so much of gender norms being challenged in culture, that is something that I know for myself. I never felt like I fit into the traditional male box because I was raised by a woman who taught me so much to embrace my feelings. And I knew, being around my friends, one thing I knew was true is that guys have emotions. It's just they're not taught to embrace them, like you guys say. And, so many of my friends would spend time with me, and it was almost like I'd get them into these private, almost therapeutic conversations, even from a young age. And I was like, guys have these parts of themselves. It's just that we're taught to suppress them. And now that I have both a son and a daughter, I go, maybe there are I'm sure there are. And I don't say that there isn't. But at the end of the day, I know my son and the way that I'm raising him. I'm kissing that kid like crazy. I'm telling him it's okay to cry. Those are things that I'm super intentional about. And my hope is that we can kind of get rid of some of that toxic masculinity, that conditioning that we have on young boys, because we all need to really have that. The first thing is, if we're not taught that the feelings are acceptable, we're definitely going to do everything we can to avoid it. And we'll use tools like food or our phones or whatever distractions we can get our hands on to really find a way out of those feelings.
So how detrimental or toxic do you think it is when parents say, oh, you won the basketball game, let's go to the ice cream shop. But then when we're not going to the ice cream shop and we're not celebrating, do you think kids are getting that feeling of, oh, I'm not good enough because I'm not being rewarded? Or when somebody's sad or they have a breakup or they don't do well on a test or they don't make the team, and we say, okay, let's go out and have some fun, and we go get a huge cinnamon bun or whatever it is. How detrimental is that? And and do you think that if we change our vocabulary and still do those tasks, but use different vocabulary and different reasoning, are our children going to be better off? Or are we teaching our children that all emotions need to be tied to food?
Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're always celebrating with food, and food becomes a trophy.
Well, I know when Jordan was in nursery school and she was 3 years old, so all the 3-year-olds were having all the babies at home, and every time somebody had a baby at home, they would throw this party for the older child, so the older child didn't feel left out because there was a baby, and it always entailed food, and it was food,
right.
and I made the school sign a contract that they would not feed my child. I don't think it's their responsibility to feed my child, so they go, don't worry, so they got Eggo waffles and yogurt tubes.
Wow.
And I said, what are you doing? She came home and she said she had this food, and they're like, but instead of doing cake, Shoshana, we thought that you'd be okay with yogurt tubes and, the Eggos. And I'm like, because we went the healthy route.
Wow.
I'm like, why do we need to celebrate with food? Why can't we make party hats and, make something nice for the baby? Or why does it always have to come back for food? So what are we teaching our children? Or am I taking it too far out of control, which I don't think I am, but you can have an opinion.
Well, I'll tell you, no, I don't think you're taking it too far. I think if we're not intentional, and you're being super intentional as a household, which I love, if we're not intentional, when we talk about the current and riding the wave, like the current's just going to take us in the direction of what predominant culture is. And I think in many instances, I look at, being a father myself, and I go, I don't want my kids to be taken in the current of where predominant culture is going in many different regards. And this is one of them. I think for our families, it's really about being clear about what are your values. What do you value? Look, someone's once said to me, everyone's an emotional eater. That's a awful term. Everyone, pairs food with emotion. Okay, sure. I don't think that we'll ever get to a point where we totally, take away food being paired with, celebratory activities, things like that. But I think what we need to do is we need to be very clear. And in therapy, what I love is we try to make the implicit explicit. We try to make the things that go unsaid, said. And I think that's what it comes down to. We need to be intentional about what do we value in this family? What do we value in this household? And we need to have conversations about the fact that in this case, hey, our kids need to know, like, hey, just so you know, like our culture kind of has this thing where we're always tying food to celebrations or rituals or rites of passage. And in our household, we think that, we may still have meals around those things, but we kind of want to also value other stuff. Like, I think so much for me is experience. I want to have experience. I want to have an experience, a connection. I'd rather go celebrate with some time at the park. I'd rather go celebrate by going on a run with my kids. I'd rather go celebrate by going to a basketball game, or something like that. I think so. Celebrating with things that are in line with your collective values and ethics, and having conversations around them. And still, that doesn't mean that you're never going to have food when you're at the basketball game or when you're doing some of those things. But I think it's being clear about food's not the reward, because I think the danger really comes in when we don't stand for something, and when we also never have the conversations about the implicit nature of how our society does those things.
I think it's funny that before you mentioned that somebody said to you that everyone's an emotional eater, and earlier in this conversation I was thinking to myself, I'm probably an emotional eater too, and everybody that I know does it as well. So the only difference is that I'm disciplined enough to stop myself, where there are so many other people that don't know how to do that or can't control that emotional eating that they have, Or maybe it's not emotional eating and I'm using the wrong term for it. But I do think that everybody, to some degree, when they're upset or when they're happy, they'll go to food and they'll find their kind of sweet tooth or salty, whatever it is that they like or that they have once in a while, and they'll go for it. The difference that I feel that I have is that I know when it's enough.
Yeah. And there's some factors in that, and maybe I could take those apart. I think it's such a fascinating question. And this is my own way of making sense of that. The one thing I say often is that I really, really, really don't believe a lot in willpower. I think that willpower is something that often, it's the onus we put on folks, on ourselves, on each other, and go, hey, I have willpower, you don't. You have willpower, I don't. I often don't think that's fair. I think that one of the abilities that we have, like right now, I have the ability to probably check myself in ways I never have before. And some of that comes down to the fact that the food, when I'm out of the pleasure trap, if I put myself in a position where I'm not eating much processed food, I'm eating whole foods, plant-based, my ability to be in touch with my body, my ability to not get locked in those patterns of eating well beyond the cues that I'm full, the ability that I have to not necessarily eat for those emotions and feeling out of control of my emotions, it's so much different. I feel so much more in control because, again, these foods are designed in a way to, I think, have some built-in controls, so to speak. But there's also this other part, too, of we look at these neural pathways that our brain creates. And we're able to look at the brain and its ability to, basically lay down these railroad tracks that if we go down the same tracks over and over, they become grease and it becomes really easy to go there. I think that for someone like myself that grew up finding reward, and I'll use that because you guys brought it up. My mom would often work long shifts at work, and the one question that she'd call with me with when she'd tell me she's coming home is, what do you want for dinner? And that was easy for me. I'd bypass everything we had at home. And my goal as a young kid looking back was I was trying to find her to say okay to picking up Taco Bell or McDonald's. So if you put me, and recently when we shot a documentary, I went in front of McDonald's and I just smelled the air. I don't know if you've smelled the air around McDonald's, but the fries, all that stuff, it's incredible, right? Yeah. And so much we don't realize this, but the number one sense that we use with food is a sense of smell. And so I went there, and when I smelled McDonald's fries, now everything in the front part of my brain, the logical me, the wise mind has said, you're not going down that route. You don't want anything in there. Do you know how many ingredients are in there? Like, no way, right? But there was a part of me, and this is where I think it's this pathway that I built through years of conditioning that said, my gosh, like almost wanted to magnetically pull me into the drive-thru and order fries and order what I used to order, even though I know logically that's not my life anymore and I don't want any part of it. So I do think that part of what happens for people is that we create our brain, these brain pathways where our brain gets really used to getting conditioned around not just the cue of food, not just what we see visually or what we smell, but also around emotions. Like, I think it's possible that for people, that if you're used to every time you feel anxious, you feel that pit of your stomach and you equate that to I need to eat for that, or I need to eat to make that go away. It might not even be something you're consciously aware of. I think that those are part of the reasons why for some people, yes, we all emotionally eat, but for some people, that powerlessness that they feel is in part because of the foods they're using when they go into those comfort eating cycles. But number two, it's also because they've ingrained these pathways in their brain that make it almost really, really challenging and difficult to bypass those. And, you can lay new tracks, but remember, when you lay those new tracks, it means that there's work that entailed to lay down the tracks, but then also too, they're not going to be greased and they're not going to be as easy to go in that old direction. So it takes some time to change. And, I'll add the third part in this too, just to kind of wrap it all into it with a nice bow. I have an addictive personality. I fully own that. For me, my rules around certain things, I always say, know yourself. Like for me, I just know that even if I went and had McDonald's fries, the way my brain works, doesn't matter how long it's been, my brain would be, I'd go to bed thinking about it. I would wake up the next day and I'd want to have that or have something else. It'd be a slippery slope. I just have that self-knowledge. And so that's the other factor too, is that I think some of us are wired to fall into these, like I always say, my brain likes patterns and loops. So I have to just know how to leverage that for the good. You know, I love going for runs. And so most days I run 6 to 10 miles. Well, guess what? Most days before, I used to, fall into patterns of going to the same fast food restaurants and eating the same copious amounts of food. So I had to accept that knowledge of myself and also say, how do I use that to my advantage in terms of the story that I want to live out?
I bet you're like me and you can't have any games on your phone.
Oh, no.
I've had to erase
Can't
all
have
games from my phone. Yeah.
Because I'd be on it all day.
So you transferred your addiction to running now.
Oh, sounds familiar.
Oh, is that a familiar story?
I don't know.
I think we both have addictive personalities in different ways. I need to work really hard at making sure that I'm not taking that negative route. And Adam totally. He puts it straight into endurance running and biking, swimming, whatever it is that he's doing. He uses it for the good. And I need to work very hard at making sure that I don't get pulled back into places I've been before.
Oh, I so relate to that. 100%. Yeah. That for me is something that you could even see, I wrote for a while on this whole thing on, we have to learn to live in the gray. I'll tell you what, I would amend some of that. If you could learn to live in the gray and you can learn not to do extremes, then more power to you. But for me, learning to live in the gray, when I went through that whole phase, that's what looked like my old weeks of having, 5 days on, 2 days off, 5 days of eating really, really well, and then 2 days of eating whatever I wanted. That was me living in the gray because my brain, for whatever reason, and I'm open about this too. I was at one point, I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, and it's not in the sort of way that people probably traditionally think about it. Like, I don't have to keep a super clean house. Things don't have to be in this certain order. It's just that my brain, I have the part of the obsessive compulsive part where that shows up in just obsessive thought patterns. And so that, when I found that out and was diagnosed with that and ended up getting on an antidepressant to help me balance that, it made so much sense. And there was so much empowerment in saying, you know what, I've been like this since I was a little kid, where I would, if I found something I liked, I got really into it. And that's just always been the way I've been. So rather than try to be someone I'm not, why don't I embrace it? But then have to be really clear with myself and be honest. Like, I know that, that's why for me, there's certain things I just don't do, because I know that if I did them, I'd probably like them too much. And I had to learn to just embrace that.
Yeah, life is hard and it takes a lot for people to get to where they want to go. And we mentioned earlier that child obesity is on the rise. And if you have the opportunity to speak to any kids out there right now who are a little heavier than they want to be, or borderline going towards obesity, or parents listening that have children in that spot, what would you say to them to help them overcome?
I think of myself. I think of, this is me speaking to and I've done therapy around this. And so when I'm speaking to you guys out there who resonate with this, I want you to know I'm speaking to a younger version of myself. I close my eyes and I visualize me when I was in 4th or 5th grade. And I remember being overweight. I remember looking around and going, I'm the heaviest kid in my class. There's no hiding it. And I remember just freaking hating myself for that. I loved myself in other areas. I hated myself. And so what I want to tell that 4th or 5th grade version of me is the same thing that I hope that you're hearing is meant for your ears to hear too. I don't care if you're in 4th or 5th grade. I don't care if you're a teenager. I don't care if you were that kid growing up. And maybe you're older now. You are enough. You are lovable the way you are. And what I mean by that is that this shell that you have does not define who you are. You are so much more than your weight. You're lovable. You're enough. And you need to just first start there and know that this world may tell you so many different things about what you need to be. And yeah, you know what? You may need to become healthier, but do not attach any of that to who you are as a human being. You're enough. You're worthy of love just the way you are. And more than anything, if you don't remember anything that was said today, I hope that's the part that you remember. And if you're a parent listening and you have a child that struggles, I know you want what's best for them. And I know that you want them to get healthy. And I know it's all in love. But if they don't get what I just said, all of it's going to fall on deaf ears. They need to get that. Speak that truth and that love into them first. Build that as a foundation. And then from there, if you're still listening and you're able to hear the rest of this, know that all the limits that you have in your mind about what you can and you can't do, maybe you're telling yourself you can't run, maybe you're telling yourself you're not athletic, all of that, limits like fears are just an illusion. You can push past them. And I'm here to tell you that I used to be the chubby, overweight kid, and I used to hate myself, and I love myself, but it's not just because I'm no longer the chubby kid. It's because I believed that that was truth, just like you need to believe it. But I also pushed beyond limits, and you can do the same, and you will do the same. So whatever it is that you think you can't do, go out and challenge yourself and just be blown away with what if you think right now you can't run, well, then go walk. And if you think you can't run for a minute, go run for a minute, and just be open to possibilities. But don't do any of it because you want to receive external validation. Do it because it's a declaration that you're worth it. So first believe and buy into knowing that truth. You are enough, you're worthy of love. And then do everything that I just mentioned, whatever it is that scares you, whatever it is to be active, be the best version of yourself as a declaration of that, not to earn it, because you already have it. You already are worthy of love.
That was powerful.
I think it's so important because I have so many friends who are scared of what's happening with their children, of what's going to be in 10 years. And they want to scream. They want to, they want to shake their heads. They want to put food in front of them, but none of that's getting anywhere. And it just needs to come back to the love and the support and the realization that all the good qualities. But so what is one thing that these parents can do to help their children understand that they're loved and get them to love themselves?
For me, because I think words are important, and that's part of my love language is words of affirmation, physical touch. What I would want, I could just say what I would want. I would want my parent just to hug me and look me in the eyes and tell me that from their heart, in their own words. And it doesn't have to be scripted, and it doesn't have to be a certain way. It can just be a look in the eyes, and maybe hug them, hold their hands, and just tell them, look, you know what? I really hope you get this. I love you so damn much, and there's nothing you could ever do in your life that's going to change that. I love you so much. I accept you no matter what. And when I tell you that I also know that you can be healthier and I want that for you, that's all love. But the first thing you need to know is that I love you no matter what. Now, look, you might never change, and you may always be over. I don't care. I'm always going to love you. Now, does that mean I don't want more for you? Of course not. Because that's part of my job as your parent. I love you enough to also say there's certain things I want for you, and I believe in you. And I know that also we accept the situations that we're in because that's what's familiar to us. So I also know as your parent that there's this other possibility out there for you, this possibility of having more energy, this possibility of experiencing and doing more things in life that maybe you're not even dreaming of right now. I know it's possible and it's out there. And I really believe that the food and the things you put in your body to fuel yourself are going to help you get there. Now, again, two things can be true. I can love you like crazy, and I can have nothing but unconditional love for you. And I could also have this idea that there's something else that's out there that could really benefit you. And I'm gonna continue to be true to both of those things. But if ever there is a moment where you feel like you're not sure about the first one, if you feel like I'm shaming you, if you feel like I'm making you feel less than, if you feel like you're failing or anything like that, and it's questioning the knowing that you have within of whether or not I love you, then you need to come and you need to have that conversation with me. I'm gonna do the same thing I'm doing right now. I'm gonna grab you, I'm gonna look you in the eyes, and I'm gonna tell you the same exact thing, because nothing can change that.
Man, I'm so happy that we connected. to be able to share your story with our audience, and for them to be able to hear the message that you're trying to put out there, it's so powerful. And we're so grateful to have had this opportunity to have you on the Plant Trainers podcast. It's really, there's some good words that you put out there in the last 5 minutes that I can't wait to replay and replay and replay. So thank you for that. If people want to connect with you and reach out, where would be the best place for them to go?
Well, and first of all, before I give you that information, it goes back to what I was grateful for. I'm so grateful for this connection, but also to things happen only in relationship. And so you guys creating not just this podcast, but also the nature and the tone of the culture of this podcast allows for me to even share what I shared. So we could have had a completely different conversation if it wasn't for you guys, the questions you asked, the tone, the culture, your hearts, all of that. So thank you so much for not just having me, but also just being in that place.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And if you guys, if you want to stay in touch with me and you want to hear more of this message and you want to also rewrite your story and just tell people about it, that's that's my heart. So you could follow me on Instagram and on Facebook. And on Instagram, it's at the Dr. Mondo, THEDRMONDO. On Facebook, you could just type in the Dr. Mondo. And on my website is drmondo.org, drmondo.org. So those are the places people can follow me. Those are the places I'm most active. And stay tuned because we have lots of fun stuff that we're up to right now. I'm getting ready to go on a speaking tour the rest of this year. And I'm also doing a project called Run for Mental Health. We're starting a nonprofit, doing a campaign around that. And then one other project, which is I'm working with David Carter, the 300-pound vegan, on going into some neighborhoods that are food deserts and taking cameras in and showing folks what it's really like to live in a neighborhood where there's not access to healthy food, so we can hopefully get more eyeballs on it from people that can make a difference and change that. So lots of fun stuff, and you can, again, follow me on those channels and you'll hear all about it.
Thank you so much. We're going to link to all of that at planttrainers.com/297 so people can have direct links. And again, thank you so much for your message. Thank you so much for the time you spent with us, and congratulations on this amazing transformation and how you're helping other people.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you all so much for listening to this edition of the Plant Trainers podcast. We want to make sure that you subscribe on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, or any other podcasting platform.
We really appreciate the feedback we receive from you every time we get a 5-star rating or review on iTunes from one of our fans. It really helps other people find us just like you did.
Thanks so much to our patrons. To become a patron, visit us at patreon.com/planttrainers. Even supporting us with $1 really makes a difference in the quality of the show.
And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram and Twitter. Our handle is at Plant Trainers. Like Plant Trainers on Facebook, join our newsletter, and check out our website at planttrainers.com for awesome recipes, a list of our services, and of course, our latest podcast.
We encourage you to email your questions to info@planttrainers.com so that we can help you improve your quality of life through nutrition and fitness.
So we hope we've inspired you today. Join us again next time and have a healthy day. Or is that too corny?
It's a little cheesy.